From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Kim Strassel and Joe Sternberg. And let's talk about President Biden's attempt this week, latest attempt really, to try to calm American anxieties over rising prices, in this case gasoline prices, which after a summer decline have been rising again. And now they're more than $6 a gallon in California, more than $5 a gallon in Nevada, which is a crucial election state this year. A little under $4 a gallon across the country. President Biden rising at the White House to say he's going to release another 15 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, having already taken that down from more than 700 million barrels to 408 million. By the way, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is supposed to be for an emergency when you need it. But the emergency, I guess, Kim, these days is the fact that Democrats look like they're going to lose the House and maybe the Senate. So I guess that's the emergency Joe Biden's responding to. But that's not the SPRO, as we call it, is supposed to be for. Nonetheless, he's trying to do it. Is it going to make any difference to gas prices?
Yeah, so this is flat out an act of political desperation. But I would note that it's also very, very reckless, too, because this reserve is supposed to sit there for actual emergencies. And the politics has been going on with it for a time. People forget Joe Biden actually first started tapping the reserve last fall because he was concerned even then about rising gas prices. By the way, this very much undermines the White House constant talking point that this is Putin's price hike. Gas prices were going up even before then because oil demand has been outstripping the supply as economies come back to life after the pandemic. And the United States, which for a long time was what you might call the swing producer out there, we had really gained that power to kind of throw more oil on the market given how much we had increased production. We've been flat ever since the pandemic ended, in part because this administration has sent signal after signal that there will be no love and no help and only agony for any U.S. producers of fossil fuels. So now we have Saudi Arabia and other OPEC countries that really are holding all the strings. They're not pumping more because they're looking at the price, a short-term thing. Also, they don't feel they owe anything to this administration that's constantly beating on fossil fuels and on them. So the president's going to release this, but it's going to be a drop in the bucket, Paul, as it has been largely from the beginning. It might have some marginal effect, maybe a couple cents here and there, but it has no chance of beating back the broader trends of rising prices. While it does, however, put us in a far more perilous position if we were to have a true emergency because the reserves are now getting dangerously low.
The one thing the president won't do, Joe, give a speech, stand up and say, well, I wanted to make the transition to green energy. We still will do what we can to do so, but we're in a global emergency. Vladimir Putin has invaded Ukraine. His oil supplies we can't reward him by continuing to buy his oil. We need to do something to rev up American oil and gas in this emergency to help our friends in Europe, the global economy, and you, the American people, as consumers. And therefore, I am going to call off all of our regulators. I am going to do what we can in Congress to promote American energy production, including fossil fuels. He just won't do that, Joe, because I think he's enthralled to the climate donors and his party.
Exactly. And I think this is a really fascinating case study in how politicians can suddenly find themselves struggling to figure out what their best electoral interest is. Because, one theory I can develop about the situation is that clearly they understand that no one wants to be the incumbent going into an election when gas prices are starting to soar again. So they have understood that that is definitely not in their electoral interest. But they also seem to be struggling to shake this notion that somehow they have to keep the progressive environmental left on board in the Democratic coalition in order to get those people out to the polls at the midterms. And so I think that you have this tension here where you have these little steps around the margins, like releasing oil from the Strategic Reserve in order to try to moderate the gas prices just enough that they can solve that political problem without poking this entirely separate bear of the environmental left and those donors and voters who they would be worried wouldn't show up. And something's got to give there, because this is not going to make a material difference to gas prices over the longer term. It definitely doesn't do anything for America's longer-term energy security.
American oil production still 1.1 million barrels a day below what it was at the pre-pandemic peak. And the only place really in domestic oil production that is increasing its barrels per day is in the Permian Basin, where a lot of wells have been previously drilled, and they are raising their production. But a lot of the rest of the shale plays across the United States simply aren't doing it because it would take more investment. And investors are saying, hey, why should we take the risk of doing something more and putting more money into it when we are in a position where we don't know what the political risk is? Kim, one other point, when the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is now down to 408 million barrels, the administration is saying, well, we're going to refill it when prices hit $67 to $72 a barrel. Now, that's not going to happen anytime soon because the Saudis are saying they want to keep the oil price at $90 to $100. And suppose it'll get there if we have a recession. That's what'll bring it down, but I don't think that's what the administration wants.
Yeah, on the shale plays that you were mentioning, a couple of problems. I mean, first off, there are some real shale plays potentially be done on federal lands, but that has been a place where there has been vast amounts of uncertainty about what the Department of Interior is going to do. There's a lot of pressure on Joe Biden to simply do no more leases onshore in this country on federal lands. And then you have the added problem too of states that there's some real fracking possibilities in places like New York, different areas of Pennsylvania, but areas like New York governor have just simply refused to allow that to happen. So that is hampering things. You've had the administration canceling some of the potentially largest projects out there for future production, places like ANWR in Alaska. And this is why we're not seeing any investment, because on every single front, the administration has said no, because we are no longer able to be that kind of swing producer and have a kind of say, as it were, more of a say in the global price given our role in supply. That really does put the Saudis and OPEC in the driving seat. And they're going to make a lot of decisions that will be in their self-interest, but won't necessarily be in the world's or certainly not the United States. And this is concerning because it's going to take a long time as well to refill that reserve. It can't happen overnight. So Joe Biden's going to need not just a drop in oil prices, but a sustained drop in oil prices. And again, like you said, outside of a recession, I'm not sure how you get that environment.
All right, Kim. All right, Joe. Thanks so much. Thank you all for listening. We're here every day on Potomac Watch. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. And thank you all for listening. You can send cards, letters, catcalls, etc. to pwpodcast@wsj.com. Keep it polite, though, if you would. Thanks all for listening. Hope to see you tomorrow on another edition of Potomac Watch.